I was 30, standing in my blush silk dress at my engagement party, the room glittering with chandeliers and my mother's carefully chosen guests. Isadora, my mom, approached with 2 glasses, one champagne, one red wine. Her smile was sharp, like a blade hidden in silk. "This is for you, Serafina," she said, handing me the wine. I lifted it to my lips, and a strange, medicinal smell hit me, sharp, wrong, like poison beneath the grape. My heart pounded. Something wasn't right. In a split second, as my sister Leora laughed with her husband, I swapped our glasses, my hands trembling. That single choice unraveled a chilling truth about my mother's intentions. It wasn't just a party, it was a stage for her control, and I just stepped out of her script. Stay with me. This is the story of how my gut instinct saved me from a nightmare. I'm Serafina, Sarah to everyone but my mother, Isadora. Growing up in her perfect Seattle home, I was molded by her rules, her criticism, her impossible standards. But I broke free, built a life in New York, and found love with Thane, my fiancé. This story isn't just about that night at my engagement party, it's about a lifetime of control, a mother's betrayal, and the moment I trusted myself. If you've ever felt a knot in your stomach, a whisper that something's off with someone you love, this is for you. My journey through betrayal to healing might just resonate with yours. If this story hits home, hit that like button and subscribe to join our community. Drop a comment below. Has your intuition ever saved you? Your stories matter, and I'm here to listen. Let's uncover the truth together, so stick around for what happens next in this wild ride. Before we dive deeper, a quick note: this story touches on heavy topics like family conflict, mental health, and betrayal. It's my truth, shared to shed light on trusting your instincts and finding peace. If these themes feel close to home, you're not alone. Resources for support are linked in the description below. My goal is to inspire healing, not pain, so please take care of yourself as we go through this. If you're ready to hear how a glass of wine exposed a lifetime of secrets, let's get started. Thank you for being here with me today. Picture a house in Seattle, the kind you'd see on a postcard: white picket fence, roses climbing the porch, every blade of grass clipped to perfection. That was my childhood home, but it wasn't a haven. It was my mother Isadora's stage, and I was her reluctant star. Isadora Whitlock, 60 now but timeless then, was a former socialite who wielded perfectionism like a whip. Every detail of our lives bent to her will: my clothes, my words, even my thoughts. "Serafina, that posture is unbecoming," she'd say at dinner parties, her voice honeyed but her eyes cold. I was 10, desperate to please her, yet every step felt wrong. She'd inspect my homework, sighing at a single misspelled word. "You're better than this, Serafina," she'd murmur, her disappointment sharper than any scolding. Our home gleamed, but it was a cage, its bars made of her impossible standards. She chose my dresses, always starched, never comfortable, because appearance is everything. My hobbies? Only what she deemed worthy. Piano lessons replaced my love for sketching because art won't get you into a good college. I learned early that love from Isadora came with conditions, and I was always falling short. She wasn't cruel in the way people imagine, she didn't yell or punish outright. Her control was subtler, wrapped in smiles that fooled everyone but me. Neighbors called her charming, elegant, the perfect mother. But I saw the truth: every choice I made was hers, every dream reshaped to fit her vision. By 12, I felt like a shadow, existing to reflect her light. That house, so perfect on the outside, was where I learned to doubt myself, to question every instinct. Isadora's rules weren't just about control, they were about erasing who I was. And yet, I kept trying to win her approval, hoping one day I'd be enough. That hope kept me tethered to her, even as it broke me. My sister Leora, 3 years younger at 27, lived in a different world under the same roof. Where I was molded, she was celebrated. Isadora's eyes softened when they landed on Leora, her perfect daughter. Leora's C's in school were charming efforts, my A's were expected, but could be better. I'd practice piano for hours, only to hear, "Serafina, your tempo's off." Meanwhile, Leora's clumsy soccer games earned cheers and glowing praise from the sidelines. "Why can't you be more like Leora?" Isadora would say, her words cutting deeper each time. Leora didn't ask for this, she was as trapped as I was, just in a gilded cage. She followed Mom's rules without question, wearing the dresses Mom picked, smiling for the family photos. I envied her ease, her ability to please Isadora effortlessly. But I also saw her struggle, the pressure to stay the good daughter. We were pitted against each other, not by choice but by Isadora's design. I loved Leora, but her golden status was a constant reminder of my failure to measure up, a wound that festered quietly between us. My father, Gideon, 62, was a ghost in our home. A lawyer who buried himself in briefs and late-night calls, he was there but never present. He saw Isadora's control, her sharp words, but he never challenged her. "It's easier this way, Serafina," he'd mutter when I begged him to intervene. His silence was his surrender, leaving me alone to face her rules. I'd catch him watching us at dinner, his eyes heavy with guilt, but he'd turn away, retreating to his office. Gideon loved me, I think, but his absence left a void Isadora filled with her demands, shaping me in ways he never saw. At night, when the house was quiet, I found my escape in a hidden journal, tucked under a loose floorboard in my room. It was my rebellion, a place where Isadora's rules couldn't reach. I'd write by flashlight, pouring out questions I couldn't voice. Why does Mom's love feel like a trap? Why am I never enough? Each word was a defiance, a claim to my own thoughts. I wrote about the time she threw out my sketches, calling them childish, or the way her smile faltered when I dared to disagree. Those pages held my anger, my confusion, my dreams of a life beyond her control. I'd lie awake, imagining a world where I could be Sarah, not Serafina, her perfect puppet. The journal was my lifeline, proof I existed beneath her expectations. But it was also a risk. If Isadora found it, I'd lose even that small freedom. So I hid it carefully, checking the floorboard daily, my heart racing at the thought of her prying eyes. That journal taught me to trust my instincts, to question her reality. It was where I began to see the truth she tried to bury. Isadora's control shaped me in ways I didn't understand until years later. By 16, I was a mirror of her perfectionism, straightening my wavy hair because she called it unruly, abandoning my sketches for serious pursuits like debate team. Her voice lived in my head, "Serafina, that outfit's too bold," or "AB+ won't get you anywhere." I chased her approval, but every step forward felt like falling. Anxiety ISOs, her gaze fixed on me. "What did you do, Serafina?" she demanded, her voice like ice. I didn't have an answer then, but I felt the weight of her disappointment, heavier than ever. By college, I was carrying anxiety like a second skin, always waiting for the next critique, the next failure. I dated boys she approved of, sons of her country club friends, though my heart wasn't in it. I'd lie awake, replaying her words, doubting every choice. Her standards weren't just rules, they were chains, binding me to a version of myself I didn't recognize. I stopped dreaming of art school, convinced it was frivolous, and pushed myself into journalism to prove I was enough. But enough for who? Her, not me. That pressure built a knot in my chest, a constant fear of falling short. It wasn't until I left for New York that I saw how deeply she'd shaped me, how I'd learned to doubt my own worth. Her control didn't just limit my choices, it stole my sense of self, leaving me scrambling to rebuild what she'd taken. That house, that life, taught me to survive, but it also taught me to hide who I really was. At 18, I fled Seattle for New York, clutching an acceptance letter to NYU's journalism program like a lifeline. That city, with its chaotic streets and pulsing energy, was my chance to break free from Isadora's chains. For years, I'd lived under her rules: straightened hair, starched dresses, dreams buried to meet her standards. But in New York, I let my wavy hair tangle in the wind, traded her approved outfits for thrift store finds, and picked up my camera again. I'd sketch in Washington Square Park, capturing faces and stories, feeling like Sarah for the first time, not Serafina, her puppet. Journalism classes taught me to chase truth, to question everything, even the voice in my head that echoed Isadora's critiques. I wrote articles about people who dared to be themselves, each word a step toward reclaiming my own identity. The distance, 3,000 miles, was a shield. Isadora's surprise visits were impossible, her phone calls easier to dodge. I wasn't free yet, not fully, her shadow lingered in my self-doubt, my fear of failure, but I was learning to breathe. New York wasn't just a city, it was a rebellion. I'd walk the Brooklyn Bridge at dusk, promising myself I'd never go back to that cage of a house, to her suffocating control. Those 4 years were my awakening, a chance to discover who I was without her rewriting my story. I didn't know then how fragile that freedom was, how Isadora would try to claw it back. But in those moments, I felt alive, like I could finally dream without her permission. NYU gave me more than a degree, it gave me a glimpse of a life where I could be enough, just as I was. In New York, I found Juniper and Veda, friends who saw me, not Isadora's version of me. Juniper, with her wild laugh, dragged me to open mic nights, cheering my shaky poetry readings. Veda, quiet but fierce, taught me to love my wavy hair, saying, "It's you, Sarah." They didn't care about my grades or my proper manners, they loved my messy, real self. We'd spend nights in dive bars, sharing dreams over cheap coffee, building a family I chose. Their belief in me was a balm, healing wounds Isadora's words had carved. They gave me courage to keep going. Sophomore year, Isadora shattered my sanctuary with an unannounced visit to NYU. I found her outside my dorm, her designer coat clashing with the graffiti-covered walls. "Serafina, these jeans are embarrassing," she said, her eyes scanning my ripped denim like I'd failed a test. She'd flown across the country to check on me, but it was control, not care. She criticized my dorm's clutter, my bohemian friends, my choice to minor in photography. "This isn't serious, Serafina," she snapped, her voice slicing through my fragile confidence. I felt 16 again, small under her gaze. But something in me stirred, a spark of defiance. I stood taller, looked her in the eye, and said, "This is my life, Mom. You need to leave." Her shock was palpable, I'd never spoken back like that. She left the next day, her silence louder than any lecture. That moment was my first real rebellion, a crack in her hold over me. I locked my dorm door that night, heart racing, knowing I'd crossed a line I couldn't uncross. Isadora's visit reminded me how far I'd come, and how much I still had to fight to stay free. At 28, I met Thane Carver at a Brooklyn art gallery, where he spilled paint on my sketchbook. "I'm so sorry," he said, his brown eyes warm with panic. I laughed, and somehow, that disaster became our first conversation. Thane, 32, an urban planner, was steady, kind, everything Isadora's approved boys weren't. He saw my photos and said, "These tell stories, not, these won't pay." We'd wander Brooklyn, talking about dreams, his for greener cities, mine for truthful journalism. 2 years later, he proposed by the Hudson, sliding a sapphire ring onto my finger. "It's you," he said, knowing I'd never wanted a diamond. My heart soared, but calling Isadora dimmed that joy. "A sapphire? How unique," she said, her voice dripping with judgment. Thane wasn't her choice, he was mine, and that made him wrong in her eyes. He saw my strength, not my flaws, and loved me without conditions. With Thane, I felt whole, like I could face anything, even Isadora's disapproval. He was my anchor, and I was his. But I didn't know then how soon that bond would be tested. When Thane proposed, I thought I'd finally escaped Isadora's grip, but planning our engagement party pulled me back into her orbit. I wanted something simple, a backyard gathering with close friends, maybe twinkle lights and pizza. But Isadora insisted on hosting, her voice on the phone dripping with that familiar authority. "Serafina, leave it to me," she said, promising an intimate event. I should have known better. Within days, she'd booked the Fairmont Hotel in Seattle, a glittering venue with crystal chandeliers and a guest list of 80, most of them her society friends, not mine. She sent me color palettes, menu options, even dress suggestions, each email a reminder of her control. "Blush silk is too plain, Serafina," she wrote, linking a more elegant gown. I ignored her, choosing the dress I loved, but every call left me drained, her voice echoing the childhood rules I'd fought to escape. She planned the floral arrangements, orchids, not my favorite peonies, because they're sophisticated. She curated the music, dismissing my indie playlist for a string quartet. This wasn't my party, it was her production, a stage to show the world her perfect daughter was still hers to mold. I'd spent years building a life free of her, but now, at 30, I felt like that anxious teenager again, second-guessing every choice. Thane saw it, but I brushed him off, clinging to a fading hope that this time, Isadora might celebrate me, not her own vision. Her control wasn't just about the party, it was about pulling me back, reminding me she still held the strings. I didn't see then how far she'd go to keep them. Thane watched me unravel with every call from Isadora, his brown eyes heavy with worry. "Sarah, we can cancel," he'd say, his voice steady, grounding. He'd seen her criticism chip away at me, her snide remarks about his modest, urban planning career, her hints that I deserved better. He knew this party wasn't about us, it was Isadora's show. "Let's elope," he suggested one night, half serious, as I stared at another email dictating table settings. I laughed, but my chest tightened. I wanted to say yes, to run from her control, but some stubborn part of me still craved her approval. Thane didn't push, he just held my hand, promising we'd get through it. "You don't have to prove anything to her," he said, his words a quiet anchor. But I felt the weight of her expectations, the same ones that had shaped my childhood. Thane's concern wasn't just for the party, it was for me, for the way Isadora's voice still lived in my head, making me doubt myself. He saw what I couldn't, her control was tightening, and this party was her chance to reel me back in. I should have listened to him. My sister Leora, now 27 and living in Portland with her husband, Dorian, saw the storm coming. A week before the party, she texted me, "Mom's gone full dictator mode, Sarah. Brace yourself." Her words hit like a warning bell. Leora knew Isadora's patterns, her need to orchestrate every detail, to make us extensions of her image. Even as the golden child, Leora felt the pressure, though it came wrapped in praise, not criticism. "She's calling me daily about your party," Leora wrote, obsessed with making it perfect. I laughed it off, but her warning lingered, a quiet nudge to stay on guard. The day before the party, I overheard a phone call that chilled me. I was at my parents' house, grabbing childhood photos for a slideshow Thane wanted. Isadora was in her study, her voice low but sharp through the cracked door. "If Serafina won't see reason, I'll make her," she said, pausing as someone replied. "Thane's not right for her, she's making a mistake." My stomach twisted. I froze, barely breathing, as she continued, "The party will change her mind." Her tone wasn't concern, it was calculation, like she was plotting a move in a game I didn't know we were playing. I slipped away, heart pounding, telling myself I'd misheard, that she couldn't mean anything sinister. But the words stuck, a splinter in my mind. Isadora had always controlled me, but this felt different, darker, more desperate. I didn't tell Thane, I didn't want to believe it myself. Yet that overheard call planted a seed of doubt, a whisper that something was wrong. I'd spent years ignoring my instincts to please her, but now, they were screaming. That conversation wasn't just a warning, it was a glimpse of the lengths she'd go to keep me under her thumb. Walking into the Fairmont's ballroom felt like stepping into Isadora's world. The space was breathtaking, crystal chandeliers casting soft light, floor-to-ceiling windows framing Seattle's skyline, tables draped in ivory linens with orchid centerpieces. It was stunning, but cold, like a museum exhibit of her perfectionism. I wore my blush silk dress, the one she'd called too plain, my wavy hair loose despite her hints at an updo. Thane, handsome in a charcoal suit, squeezed my hand. "We can leave any time, Sarah," he whispered, his eyes scanning the crowd of 80, Isadora's friends, not ours. I forced a smile. "It's just a few hours," I said, more to myself than him. The room buzzed with polite chatter, glasses clinking, a string quartet playing her approved music. I felt like a prop in her production, not the bride-to-be. Isadora glided through, her tailored dress flawless, her smile practiced. "Serafina, you're late," she said, air-kissing my cheeks, her perfume sharp and expensive. "This dress, well, it's your choice." Her words stung, a reminder I'd never be enough. Juniper and Veda, my New York friends, hugged me fiercely, their presence a lifeline among strangers. "She's intense," Juniper murmured, nodding toward Isadora, who was already steering me toward her country club crowd. "The Hendersons are dying to meet you," she said, pulling me away from Thane. I nodded, my chest tight, feeling the weight of her expectations settle over me. Thane's parents, Elias and Margot, offered warmth, their genuine smiles a stark contrast to Isadora's calculated charm. "We're so happy for you, Sarah," Margot said, her hug grounding me. But Isadora's presence loomed, her eyes tracking my every move. This wasn't my celebration, it was her stage, and I was playing a role I'd fought to leave behind. I clung to Thane's hand, trying to anchor myself, but the air felt heavy, like a storm was coming. I didn't know then that the night would unravel everything, that her control was about to take a darker turn. An hour before the engagement party's end, the air in the Fairmont's ballroom felt heavier, like the calm before a storm. Isadora, my mother, took center stage, her presence commanding every eye. She signaled a waiter, who approached with a silver tray, for champagne flutes and one glass of red wine, its deep crimson catching the chandelier light. "Serafina doesn't care for champagne," she announced, her voice smooth but her smile too tight, too deliberate. The crowd murmured their approval, charmed by her thoughtfulness, but I felt a prickle of unease. I'd never complained about champagne, it was her narrative, not mine. She crossed the room, her heels clicking, and handed me the wine, her eyes locked on mine with an intensity that made my skin crawl. "To my daughter," she said, raising her flute, and her future. The room echoed, to new beginnings, glasses clinking in celebration. I lifted the wine to my nose, expecting the familiar scent of grapes, but something else hit me, a sharp, medicinal undertone, like antiseptic masked by fruit. My pulse quickened. It wasn't right. My mind raced back to her overheard call, her words about making me see reason. Was this what she meant? I froze, the glass inches from my lips, my instincts screaming to stop. Isadora watched me, her gaze unwavering, as if waiting for me to drink. The room spun, the laughter and music fading to a dull hum. I'd spent years doubting myself to please her, but in that moment, something shifted. I couldn't ignore the warning in my gut. Her smile, her control, her perfect party, it all felt like a trap closing around me. I didn't know what was in that glass, but I knew I couldn't trust it. Or her. That wine wasn't a gift, it was a test, and I wasn't going to fail it. Not this time. Leora, my sister, was across the table, laughing with her husband, Dorian, her champagne flute untouched. She was radiant, unaware of the weight pressing on my chest. My hands trembled as I held the wine, its strange smell lingering in my nose. Isadora's eyes were still on me, expectant, her smile a challenge. I didn't think, I just acted. While Leora turned to Dorian, her hand brushing his, I slid my wine glass next to hers and took her champagne, the swap so quick even I barely registered it. My heart pounded, loud enough to drown out the quartet. I raised the flute, mimicking the toast, my lips barely touching the rim. Isadora's gaze flickered, a shadow of confusion crossing her face, but she said nothing. The crowd drank, oblivious, their cheers filling the room. I watched Leora pick up the wine, her fingers curling around the stem, and a knot tightened in my stomach. Had I just made a terrible mistake? I didn't know what was in that glass, but I couldn't shake the feeling it was meant for me. My instinct had taken over, and now, all I could do was wait. For 30 agonizing minutes, everything seemed normal. The party hummed along, guests danced, Thane whispered jokes to ease my tension, and I forced smiles, my eyes darting to Leora. She sipped the wine casually, chatting with Dorian, her laughter bright. I started to doubt myself. Maybe I'd imagined the smell, the threat. Maybe Isadora's control was just in my head, a ghost from my childhood. But then, I saw her falter. Leora's hand gripped Dorian's arm, her face draining of color. I don't feel right, she mumbled, her words slurring, barely audible over the music. Her glass slipped, wine splashing the tablecloth like blood. Dorian caught her as her knees buckled, her eyes glassy, unfocused. "Leora," he shouted, his voice cutting through the crowd. The room froze, the quartet halting mid-note. She clutched her stomach, sweat beading on her forehead, her breathing shallow. "Something's wrong," Dorian said, panic rising. I pushed through the guests, my heart in my throat, reaching her side. Her skin was clammy, her gaze distant. "It's not normal," I whispered, my voice trembling. Thane was beside me, his hand on my shoulder, but I barely felt it. I caught Isadora's face in the crowd, her shock looked real, but her eyes darted to me, searching. The truth hit me like a wave, that wine was meant for me. Leora was suffering because I'd swapped the glasses. Guilt clawed at me, but so did certainty. Isadora had done this. She'd planned it. The room spun, guests murmuring, someone calling for help. Leora slumped against Dorian, barely conscious, her breaths uneven. I held her hand, whispering, "I'm sorry, I'm so sorry," as the reality sank in. My sister was fighting for air because of my choice, but also because of Isadora's betrayal. That glass wasn't just wine, it was poison, and I'd narrowly escaped it. But at what cost? As Leora lay in Dorian's arms, a memory surged, unbidden, sharp as a blade. I was 12, sick with a cold, and Isadora gave me cough syrup from an old bottle in her medicine cabinet. "It's fine, Serafina," she said when I hesitated, her voice firm. I drank it, trusting her, but hours later, I was vomiting, my head spinning, my body weak for days. She called it an accident, said the syrup was expired, but I remembered her eyes, calm, almost satisfied, as I lay in bed. She'd brushed it off, but I never forgot the doubt that settled in me, the question I buried, had she meant to make me sick? Now, watching Leora's collapse, that memory roared back. Isadora's accidents were never accidents. Her control had always had a darker edge, one I'd ignored to survive. That syrup, like this wine, was a tool to keep me in line, to weaken me when I dared to stray. The flashback faded, but its truth lingered. My instincts had saved me before, and they'd saved me tonight. But Leora was paying the price for my survival. The ballroom dissolved into panic. Guests backed away, their faces a blur of shock and whispers. "Call 911, someone shouted, and Thane pulled out his phone, his voice steady despite the chaos. Paramedics burst through the doors, their radios crackling, pushing through the crowd to reach Leora. Dorian held her, his eyes wild with fear, as they checked her pulse, her breathing. I stood frozen, my hands still clutching hers, guilt and rage warring inside me. Isadora approached, her voice trembling, "What's happening to my daughter?" But her eyes met mine, and I saw it, a flicker of calculation beneath her concern. I turned to Thane, my voice low, shaking. "I swapped the glasses, Thane. That wine was for me." His face hardened, but he nodded, pulling me close. The paramedics lifted Leora onto a stretcher, her body limp, oxygen mask in place. Guests were ushered out, the party crumbling like Isadora's facade. I followed the stretcher, my mind racing, knowing this wasn't over. The wine wasn't a mistake, it was a plan, and I'd just stepped into the heart of Isadora's darkest secret. The hospital waiting room was a blur of sterile white walls and the sharp tang of antiseptic. Leora lay in ICU, tubes snaking from her arms, her breathing steadied by machines. Dorian sat beside her, his face etched with fear, his hand gripping hers like it was the only thing keeping her here. I stood by the window, staring at the Seattle skyline, my mind replaying the moment I swapped those glasses. Guilt clawed at me. Leora was fighting for her life because of my choice. Thane's arm around me was the only thing keeping me upright. A doctor approached, her expression grim. "Your sister was poisoned," she said, her words landing like a punch. "Sedatives, mixed with something we're still identifying. This wasn't an accident." My knees buckled. That wine was meant for me. I whispered to Thane, I knew it smelled wrong. I knew. He held me tighter, his voice low. "You saved yourself, Sarah. You didn't know she'd drink it." But the truth didn't ease the ache. Isadora arrived, her face pale, her voice trembling as she asked, "What's happened to my daughter?" But her eyes darted to me, searching, calculating. I saw it then, the mask she'd worn my whole life, slipping just enough to reveal the truth. She wasn't shocked, she was cornered. The police were called, their questions sharp and relentless. "Why did you swap the glasses?" one officer asked. I hesitated, my voice barely above a whisper. "It smelled off. Anne. I didn't trust her." Thane squeezed my hand, urging me to keep going. "Her," I said, nodding toward Isadora. The officer's eyes narrowed, and I felt the weight of my words, the years of doubt crystallizing into certainty. Leora was here because of Isadora's plan, a plan meant to break me. The hospital wasn't just a place of healing, it was where her betrayal came into focus, where I saw my mother for who she truly was. In the hospital's fluorescent haze, the police returned with something that changed everything, a small, leather-bound diary found in Isadora's purse. They showed me a photocopied page, her elegant handwriting spilling secrets like venom. "Serafina's engagement is a mistake," she wrote, 3 days before the party. "Thane is weak, unworthy. If the party doesn't change her mind, more direct measures are needed." My stomach churned. Her words were cold, calculated, a blueprint for betrayal. Earlier entries detailed her obsession, pages of research on sedatives, notes on how to disrupt my plans. "She must stay in Seattle, under my guidance," one line read, as if I were still a child to be molded. The diary wasn't just a record, it was proof of her unraveling, her need to control me spiraling into something darker. I stared at the pages, my hands shaking, as Thane read over my shoulder, his breath catching. "She planned this, Sarah," he whispered, his voice thick with anger. The officer explained they'd found it during a routine search, her purse left unattended in the chaos. Isadora had no idea it was in their hands, her private thoughts now evidence. Each word I read felt like a betrayal reborn, every criticism, every rule, every moment she'd made me doubt myself was part of this. The diary wasn't just her confession, it was my liberation, a mirror showing the truth I'd always felt but never dared to face. She hadn't just tried to make me sick, she'd tried to break my future. That realization burned, but it also freed me. I wasn't crazy for doubting her. My instincts were right. In the waiting room, Gideon, my father, stood silently, his face a map of regret. Isadora tried to pull him into her narrative, her voice soft, pleading. "Gideon, tell them this is a misunderstanding," she said, her hand on his arm. For years, he'd retreated, letting her control our lives, but this time, something shifted. He shook his head, his voice low but firm. "No, Isadora. Not this time." Her eyes widened, her composure cracking. "You don't mean that," she hissed, but he stepped back, refusing her pull. "Our daughter's in there because of you," he said, his words heavy with years of unspoken guilt. I'd never seen him stand up to her, never heard him name her actions so clearly. His defiance was quiet, but it was a seismic shift. Gideon looked at me, his eyes wet. "I'm sorry, Sarah," he said, and I knew he meant for everything, for his silence, his absence, for letting her shape our lives. That moment wasn't just his rebellion, it was an apology, a promise to be the father he'd failed to be. Isadora's mask slipped further, her control unraveling as even Gideon turned away from her. In Leora's hospital room, the air was thick with tension. Isadora burst in, her face a mix of concern and defiance. "My poor girl," she said, reaching for Leora, but I stepped between them. "We need to talk, Mom," I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside. She waved me off, her smile brittle. "There's nothing to discuss, Serafina. This is a terrible mistake." But I held up the photocopied diary page, her handwriting glaring under the hospital lights. "The police found this," I said, watching her face freeze. "That's private," she snapped, lunging for it, but Dorian blocked her, his eyes blazing. "You poisoned my wife," he said, his voice shaking with rage. Isadora laughed, a sharp, desperate sound. "It was a mild sedative, nothing dangerous. I just wanted Serafina to miss that silly after-party." Her admission stunned us. Leora, still weak, whispered, "You did this?" Isadora's mask shattered. "I was protecting you both," she cried, but her words rang hollow. I stepped closer, my voice low. "Stop lying, Mom. Stop manipulating us." Her eyes flashed with anger. "How dare you? After all I've done for you." I didn't flinch. "What have you done?" "Controlled me, criticized me, made me feel worthless." She recoiled, but I kept going. "You read my texts, didn't you? You knew about the after-party." Her silence was answer enough. Leora's voice, faint but firm, cut through. "You never loved Sarah for who she was." The truth hung heavy, a wound laid bare. Isadora's control was gone, her power stripped by our united defiance. Isadora's anger erupted, her voice rising to a scream. "You're all against me." She lunged at me, her hands outstretched, but Thane and Gideon pulled her back, their faces grim. Her words dissolved into sobs, a performance for no one. Hospital security rushed in, followed by police, their badges glinting under the lights. "Isadora Whitlock, you're under arrest," an officer said, cuffs clicking around her wrists. She fought, her elegance gone, her voice shrill. "This is a mistake. I'm her mother." But the officers were unmoved, leading her out as she twisted to glare at me. "You'll regret this, Serafina," she spat, her eyes burning with fury. I stood still, watching her go, my heart heavy but resolute. Gideon's hand rested on my shoulder, a silent anchor. Leora's monitor beeped steadily, a reminder she was alive. The room fell quiet, the weight of her betrayal settling over us. Isadora's arrest wasn't just the end of her plan, it was the end of her hold over me. For the first time, I saw her not as my mother, but as a woman undone by her own need to control. I was free, but the cost was staggering. After the chaos of that night, the truth about Isadora came into sharp focus. The police investigation peeled back her polished facade, revealing a woman undone by her own mind. A psychiatric evaluation diagnosed her with narcissistic personality disorder, laced with paranoid traits, a clinical explanation for her relentless need to control me, to shape my life into her vision. She wasn't evil, I realized, but deeply broken, her love warped by a compulsion to dominate. The charges were serious, attempted poisoning and assault, though her lawyer argued diminished capacity, citing her mental state. She was ordered into treatment, a locked facility where she'd face her demons, or at least be contained by them. I wrestled with what this meant. My mother, the woman who'd raised me, had tried to sabotage my future, to make me sick to keep me close. The betrayal cut deep, but the diagnosis gave me a strange relief. It wasn't my fault. Her actions weren't about my worth, they were about her illness. I chose to testify if it came to trial, not for vengeance, but for closure, for the little girl in me who'd spent years chasing her approval. Isadora's world had crumbled, but I wasn't going to let it bury me. I'd spent too long living in her shadow, apologizing for who I was. Now, I saw her clearly, a woman trapped by her own mind, not the infallible figure she'd pretended to be. That truth didn't erase the pain, but it gave me permission to let go, to start rebuilding a life free from her control. Leora's recovery was slow, but her spirit was unbroken. When she woke in the hospital, her first words to me were, "You swapped the glasses, didn't you?" I nodded, tears falling, expecting anger, but she squeezed my hand. "You saved us both, Sarah." That moment cracked open years of distance between us. Isadora had pitted us against each other, me, the flawed daughter, Leora, the golden one. But now, we saw how she'd manipulated us, shaping our rivalry to keep us tethered to her. We started talking, really talking, over coffee in Portland, then long walks by the coast. "I thought you were dramatic," Leora admitted, "but you were surviving her." We laughed, cried, rebuilt a sisterhood free from her shadow. Leora told me how she'd felt trapped by Isadora's praise, always fearing she'd lose it. Together, we unraveled the lies we'd been fed, finding strength in our shared truth. Our bond became a refuge, a promise to choose each other over the past. With Dorian and Thane by our sides, we became a new kind of family, one built on honesty, not control. Leora wasn't just my sister anymore, she was my ally, my home. Therapy became my lifeline after that night. I'd carried Isadora's voice in my head for years, her criticisms shaping my every doubt. My therapist helped me see my hypervigilance, once a source of shame, as my strength. "It saved you, Sarah," she said, her words sinking deep. "That instinct kept you alive." I learned to unpack the anxiety Isadora had planted, to name the ways she'd made me feel unworthy. Each session was like peeling back layers, rediscovering the girl who loved sketching, who dreamed without fear. I wasn't broken, I'd been surviving. Therapy taught me to trust my instincts, to set boundaries without guilt. I started saying no to things that didn't serve me, choosing peace over perfection. It wasn't easy. Some days, I still heard her voice, telling me I'd fail. But I learned to talk back, to remind myself I was enough. That journey wasn't just about healing from the wine incident, it was about reclaiming my life, piece by piece. I began to see my worth, not through Isadora's eyes, but through my own. Therapy didn't erase the past, but it gave me tools to build a future where I could thrive, not just survive. In the aftermath, I turned my pain into purpose. I started a blog, a space to share my story and connect with others who'd faced toxic family dynamics. I wrote about the wine, the diary, the betrayal, but also the healing, how I learned to trust my gut, to rebuild my life. The response was overwhelming. Strangers sent messages, saying, your story gave me courage to set boundaries with my mom, or, I thought I was alone. Each comment felt like a bridge, linking my wounds to their strength. I shared tips from therapy, how to recognize manipulation, how to honor your instincts, and stories of small victories, like choosing my own path without guilt. The blog became a community, a place where people like me, scarred by control, could find hope. I wasn't just writing for myself anymore, I was writing for the girl I'd been, for the one still trapped in someone else's story. That blog wasn't just words on a screen, it was my rebellion, my proof that Isadora's hold was gone. I was building something she couldn't touch, a legacy of healing that turned my pain into light for others. Thane and I didn't let Isadora's actions steal our future. We planned a small wedding on Brooklyn's waterfront, the Hudson sparkling under a summer sky. No chandeliers, no guest lists of strangers, just our chosen family, the people who loved us for us. Juniper and Veda helped me pick a simple lace dress, one that felt like me, not Isadora's vision. Gideon walked me down the aisle, his hands steady, his eyes soft with pride. "You're free now, Sarah," he said, his voice breaking. It was his apology for all the years he'd stayed silent, his blessing for the life I'd built. Thane stood waiting, his sapphire ring glinting on my finger, his smile anchoring me. We wrote our vows, promising a partnership of equals, a love that didn't demand perfection. Leora, fully recovered, stood beside me, her laughter brighter than ever. Isadora wasn't there, she was in treatment, her letters arriving sporadically, filled with excuses I no longer needed to read. The day was ours, a celebration of freedom, of choosing each other over the past. As we danced under string lights, I felt whole, not because the pain was gone, but because I'd learned to carry it without letting it define me. That wedding wasn't just a beginning, it was my declaration that I'd never live in her shadow again. I'd chosen my family, my life, my truth. Looking back, that night at my engagement party wasn't just about a glass of wine, it was the moment I broke free from Isadora's control. For years, her voice shaped me, her criticisms carving doubt into my bones. I'd lived to please her, to fit her mold, but when I swapped that glass, I chose myself. My instincts, honed by years of her manipulation, saved me from her plan to pull me back into her world. That choice wasn't easy, it cost me pain, guilt, and a sister in a hospital bed, but it also gave me clarity. Isadora wasn't my enemy, she was a woman trapped by her own broken mind, her love twisted into something toxic. Letting go of her approval was like shedding chains, heavy but liberating. I learned that freedom isn't just leaving a place, it's trusting your gut, setting boundaries, and choosing who you let into your life. Thane, Leora, my chosen family, they're my anchors now, not her rules. This story isn't just mine, it's for anyone who's felt trapped by someone they love, who's questioned their worth because of another's words. You don't have to stay in that shadow. Your instincts are your power, your truth is your strength. I found mine in that ballroom, under the weight of Isadora's gaze, and I'm still learning to trust it every day. You can too. Your story, your pain, it's not the end. It's the beginning of something new, something you get to define. If this story stirred something in you, I want to hear your truth. Have you ever had a moment where your gut screamed that something was off, and you listened? Maybe it was a family member, a friend, someone who should have had your trust but didn't. Or maybe you had to walk away from someone you loved to protect yourself. Those moments are heavy, but they're powerful, they show you who you are. Drop your story in the comments below, I read every one. Your experience matters, whether it's a quiet victory or a painful lesson. Sharing it can be a step toward healing, a way to connect with others who've been there. I know how hard it is to speak up, to name the things that hurt. But you're not alone. This community is a safe space for those truths, for the stories we carry in silence. Let's break that silence together. Tell me how you trusted your instincts, how you set a boundary, or how you found your way out. Your voice is stronger than you know, and I'm here to listen. This story is just the start. In my next video, I'm diving deeper into how I'm healing from a childhood shaped by control. I'll share the tools I've learned in therapy, the ways I'm rebuilding trust in myself, and how I'm creating a life free from toxic ties. If you've ever wondered how to move forward after betrayal, or how to turn pain into purpose, you won't want to miss it. Subscribe now and hit the bell so you're the first to hear it. There's more to come, and I want you along for this journey of truth and healing. If my story resonated with you, please hit that like button. It helps others find this video and join our community. Share it with someone who needs to hear that their instincts are valid, that they can choose their own path. Subscribe if you want to keep exploring these stories of resilience and truth. I'm building a space where we can be real about the hard stuff. Your comments mean the world. They're not just words, they're connections, proof we're not alone. Tell me your story, your struggles, your wins. I'm here for all of it. This isn't just my channel, it's ours, a place to heal, to grow, to find strength in our shared experiences. If you're carrying a story like mine, know that you're seen, you're heard, and you're enough. Let's keep this conversation going, supporting each other through the pain and into the light. Thank you for being here, for listening, for sharing this moment with me. Your presence makes this community stronger, and I'm grateful for every one of you. Let's keep building this together. See you in the comments.